it's difficult. There are people that are out there that have some assessments, but again, they don't have the knowledge or education to say, ooh, is this assessment assessing something, one, that's important, or two, is it valid? The test that they're using, assessing the right thing, or saying that is it testing correctly what it's saying it's testing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
the
huge.
reason behind it.
And what's the reason behind it?
That's a
right?
huge one.
Fundamentally, exactly. that is massive, right? So,
and I would say it is massively done wrong consistently.
Yeah, and I understand why. I mean, there's just so much information out there, and people need answers, want answers, and they're trying to sell shit.
That's true.
They're trying to sell shit. And I never want to be that guy that every time you hear me talk, you think I'm trying to sell you something. I'm not. I'm not. What I want you to get from me is like, hey, this guy said some stuff. It kind of makes sense. Let me think about that a little bit.
Process.
Yeah. How I should question this.
Absolutely.
Like, what about that I just do I not agree with, or do I not understand? And then how do I then go get more information to understand it better, to decide whether or not that guy's right or wrong? And it doesn't always have to be about that.
That's what I think Chris and those guys, when they say, don't over-science my shooting or over-science my violence, whatever they say, right? That's really what they're fighting against, is people that are trying to use the science to silence, because it's overpowering you of like, you should do this.
Right.
We're not doing that. We're giving you the information, process it, think about it, and be like, hey, maybe this does make sense, so you can better be informed.
Yeah, so it's have a more informed consumer so that they can make a more informed decision.
That's what you said in the last episode. You said, I'm not going to treat you like you're dumb.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the information.
Yeah.
And I'm going to help you make a decision. Yeah. Now, if you don't want to go with it,
you do you, boo.
You do you, boo.
You do you, boo. So let's talk about assessment as, with regard to the athlete, right? Yep. And, we're talking about the specific genre that is, those law enforcement officers or whatever. There's a lot of assessments they go through all the time, right? In order to even get to where they're at in their career, there's a ton of assessment. Like going back to just maybe a selection, but the academy, all the things they were assessed on there. This is not new. So this is just, it's part of their process. And then obviously to be on the teams, there's assessing happening all the time. Even if you're a beat cop, you're out there, you're assessing this situation versus the next situation. So assessment shouldn't be a dirty word, and it shouldn't be looked at as something you're afraid of. It's something that you're doing naturally all the time anyway.
Yeah.
But the question is like, what am I assessing? And when it comes to, we said this on the last episode too, like you may not be qualified to assess your own fitness level or your own, capacity level, or things that we're going to talk about today. Why would you be equipped to do that? At what point in your career were you given the knowledge, the skills in order to be able to do that? So I want to talk about assessing stuff as human performance people or professionals, how we look at things without over-sciencing it, right? To give us some data that matters, that we can then apply or give to somebody else in a way that will matter to them so that they can be better at whatever it is they're trying to do. It's pretty simple. It's not trying to overcomplicate the shit. Like, we're trying to keep it super simple. So, I mean, again, going back, and I'll turn this over to Aaron here. What are the components? We talked about this a little bit before, but what are the major components that any athlete should sort of prioritize, particularly about the athletes that we're talking about?
Speed and power, number one. That's the foundation of any sort of athletic movement. You got to be able to move, got to be able to decelerate, explode out of position, into position, jump, land, all of that stuff. That is the...
React.
React, exactly. Agility, speed, power, all that kind of lumped into one spot. Strength, I would say, would be number two. Strength movements, how you train in the gym, just amplifies your ability to move out in the field. If you are lifting only, you're not going to get better at movement. If you're moving only, you can get better. It's just going to be incremental, just from skill acquisition. But adding the strength piece to it is going to make those exponential jumps, being able to put more force in the ground, being able to control your body, have a tight core, transfer power correctly. So the strength adds to the speed and power. And then finally, number three is work capacity. So it could be short, medium, long capacity. This is where Heppner's space is producing and programming for the work capacity. Definitely leaning on him heavily on that piece. But essentially, work capacity is the amount of work you can perform, adapt to, and recover from.
Notice mine was the third important one.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah.
1, 2, and
9.
Now you know what you are.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. Those are very, very, again, high level. The way you just brought it together. It's interesting. You started with strength. Speed and power. I agree with you. To become an athlete, or like the best athletes, are also the fastest, most powerful ones,
Exactly.
right? When you look at those that are competitive, right? But so much of that is rooted in strength, right? That base level strength. So you can't have one without the other. You can kind of get some, but you're going to be lacking in the other. So those two things go hand in hand. And sometimes I think people have a tough time with it. Like, okay, so is it the chicken or is it the egg?
Right.
What should I be training here? Like I see these guys. I see Jake running around on the range super fast, moving super quick, and getting in and out of positions real fast. That's the kind of training I need to do. I need to do that because I need to do that. But at the same time, you have very little capacity to be able to do that work, and you're not very strong. Like you don't have some basic things underneath you. Again, strength is a thing. Like joint integrity is not there.
I was going to say, you're increasing your chance for injury. Your capacity, you will have inability to have capacity. Like the strength is absolutely, they go hand in hand, like you said.
Yeah, and so again, like with like people will go like, oh man, like I'm not going to get injured. Who gets injured running around on the range outside of making a mistake with a firearm or whatever?
I'm like
all the time.
I was going to say like
all the time.
Once a class.
I mean, I got a
seriously.
good buddy of mine is in a boot because he has a total rupture of his Achilles tendon just 2 weeks ago. He's miserable, and this is a dude who makes a living, in this space, and now he can't do it. Right now he's out of commission. So anyway, going back, like it's interesting how you put those together. But I think that's something that people struggle with. That's why I wanted to call it out. And I think the other thing they struggle the most with is understanding what the hell capacity even means.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I had to ask you, like if I said, Hep, like what if you asked the average athlete, what capacity meant to them? And again, this would be a depends question, right? But what do you think they would say?
How I defined it, well, ask me as the athlete, how I defined it for years when I was in CrossFit was my capacity could be likened to how well I can move a certain percentage of my strength over time. So Jake's probably like, man, I freaking hate that definition. It's so bad. He's out. But like essentially, my capacity was what, I'll put a percent to it. How well can I move my 80%?
Yeah.
How well can I move my 80%? If I can move my percent better than his, now I understand we have different 80%, but that's why it's a percentage. Yeah. So then my capacity could be better than somebody else if I can apply, move my 80% better than somebody else.
Yeah, I get it. Like we were having a conversation in the truck after lunch just about athletes and how they were training or whatnot. And the name Lance Armstrong came up. the Livestrong Stadium, which is now not Livestrong anymore.
No more.
Right? They can't do that. But here's the thing. Like I think about him because, and I use him as reference because I think a lot of people know who he is, know what he did. The dude rode a bike. He made a living on a bike, and he did some things that made him very good at that. There was some raw talent there. And again, people are like, how much talent do you need to ride a bicycle? I mean, talent from an athleticism perspective that allowed him to excel on the bicycle. And part of that was when you look at cycling, particularly the Tour de France, which obviously he was very famous for, that sport is about a power to rate ratio. And it's about being able to push actually beyond 80% for longer than the other guy. It is a speed and power sport when you look at it. You have to have base level strength in order to get there. Obviously not too much hypertrophy or muscle on your frame because then your power to weight ratio is off, right? But going back to capacity, the biggest thing there is those guys being able to push that motor near red line and to ride on that for as long as they possibly could. Those races are won in the mountains, right? When the things get really, really ugly. And so for me, when I look at it, it goes back to like, how well can I get to and maintain my 80%? And 1 percentage point makes a massive difference between you're either on the podium or the guy that's 79 can only go 79% is 10th place. Yeah. And that's those are I think that's kind of how I look at it. So I think people like, what is that? Like it's cardiorespiratory endurance, right? It's muscular endurance. There is there are energy systems that we're using in there that I think are very much misunderstood and misapplied during workouts. Like the go all the time is not the way you're going to build that most effectively and efficiently. So I say all that to say, just to kind of bring it back when we look at it, like what do we see being applied in the industry as a means to train all of those things? We brought this up before. CrossFit's a big one because
it's awesome.
Let's be honest. Like, what else out there is there that gets you that close to training all of
not
those
F45,
things?
that's for sure.
Exactly. Not an Orange Theory. No. So that's one of them. But I see guys drifting towards other places too. I wonder what you guys' thoughts
Yeah,
are.
I mean, I'll go first at least on it. I see a lot. There's just I feel like it turns into what is that person like, or what do they? Maybe it's just what they know. You know what I mean?
Right?
He's judging me right now.
It's
So
like
hard.
it's
why I
not
did
so much the CrossFit thing. I see there are those running programs, right? That it's just like, hey, you're gonna run, or you're gonna ruck, and it's like, do you
Mileage.
ever do that for your job ever?
Right.
Okay, then why are you doing it, kind of thing, right? Now, if you can articulate to me, hey, we're trying to go into aerobic, right? Cool, but more often than I would say than not. I would say there are programs that we're starting to see more and more. They're trying to be specialized, but they're commonly missing, I would say, maybe not the common thing, but they are usually missing something important, right? Especially whenever I see it, it's a not an expert. They're really good at working out.
They're an enthusiast.
They're enthusiasts, right? They're not an expert. They don't understand the human performance side. Like, again, how to appropriately program intensity for a job that already has a lot of intensity, not just in the physicality, but the mental, the emotional, like all these other pieces that people really forget to look at. So it's either too hard or maybe it's too easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending upon what they're doing. There's another big one I was trying to think on that I have. It'll come to me. But what do you got? What are you saying?
There's always been an overemphasis in the work capacity piece and the training like you fight of like just trying to redline constantly and trying to see how far you can go before you break, finding your breaking point so you're not actually finding your breaking point in the live situations. And there's not a lot of, I want to say generalists, that doesn't feel like the right word. More training for well-roundedness of all the capacity or all the pieces that are going to make you better. So there's a lot of overemphasis in certain things because some people, one, don't either have the understanding of how to train it or just don't like to train it, and other it's what they like to do.
Yeah.
So they'll find the bias to what they like to do, or one that's been popular is what's sexy on Instagram, what's going to get the most views, what can they put their camera up and film themselves doing, and
Build drills.
Build drills.
Yeah, the train like you fight thing that obviously gets way misapplied.
Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned intensity. The other thing that I think is very much misunderstood is volume and understanding how to train volume and intensity. That meaning volume being how much work are you actually doing, and then more importantly, okay, if you have all this work to do, how do I time that out? How do I space that out? What should the frequency look like? Do I have to do it all on one day? Could I space it out over a couple days? And that's depends based on the program that you're looking at. Also, obviously, your goal, but what are those other things in life, work, job, everything else that could be limiting factors there?
And that was something he and I actually had a really good conversation on last year, maybe.
Debate.
Debate?
I probably won't.
Calls it
Debate.
conversation or debate?
Yeah.
Everything's a debate.
But we were talking about capacity.
Yep.
And he was just like, no, they can do this. I'm like, dude, no. Like, these people have...
You're a freak.
They have, one, you're a freak, but no. But no, it was also one of those things where I think we had a really good conversation about, again, those other factors that come into these people's lives, that it's not, that they have kids or their job is extremely stressful. Cops generally are not dying on the street. They're dying after, when they get done from heart disease and obesity, all these other variables, right? But then whenever they go home, again, the four of us, we drive home. We don't think about somebody may try to come after us because we arrested them last year or whatever, right? Or they're constantly trying to assess. And I think it's one of those things where when you look at the intensity, there's so many variables and factors there. And so that was something he and I had talked on early on that I do think is commonly misunderstood. The other thing I was going to go back to was, I think the common thing that's missed is the speed and power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the one I think most often that I see missed because, again, coming back to what we said last episode, a lot of people just don't know how to train it and train it appropriately. Every class, this guy asks, hey, how do we train speed? At what distance? What do you think your most common answer is?
400 meters.
100. 100's typically the
100.
one.
100, but
it
even
goes up
people
to
say
400
up to 400.
meters. Yeah.
And it's like,
I remember
my
hearing
guy.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, like for everybody listening that's like, I don't know the right answer to that. What's the right answer? We're going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Like you're going to get that. And it's not like what a bunch of idiots.
Yeah, no.
It's just like,
good call it.
wow,
No.
this is a reality that these guys really don't know that. And part of the speed and power thing too, like to maybe define it a little bit more, speed and power is not just how far or how fast you can run from point A to point B, right? You mentioned it earlier. Like there is the how fast can you slow down? right? How fast can you change direction? How fast can you get up off the ground? And all those things kind of matter, right? So speed and power goes beyond what you kind of see. But I think it gets boiled down to like a clean, or a snatch, or
those look great on camera. That's why that's all he posts.
This is paining me right now. This is giving me pain.
There's nothing wrong with those lists. Those lists are super valuable for building both strength and power. But
there's a time and place for all.
Yeah, that's a great call. Because I wasn't trying to crap on it.
No, I didn't think that at all.
It's a good call out though, because it's not. It really is though. That's where we've tried to step in and fill a gap, right? To where that is a misconception of like 400 ain't a sprint. Right. Like that is not speed work. You may be sprinting, or you may think you're sprinting, but that is not speed work. Right. And that is one of the areas, again, that I think I have most commonly seen is there is a gap. There's a problem. If you're trying to be in the tactical community, whether it be competition, MIL, LE, whatever it is, civilian carrying a gun, and that is nowhere in your repertoire of something you're training, that is a mistake.
So here's the thing too, like I'm just calling attention to this, like, and we've said this before, but we're kind of going through all these things. There's a lot of stuff that you have to get in and you have to get done, going back to like you guys having the capacity conversation, Jake and Heppner having the capacity conversation and like, dude, these guys are not going to be able to do all of this. We're going to have to figure out a way to maybe organize it a little bit different because this is a different kind of athlete. This is an athlete with no off season. Right. This is an athlete that has to be able to perform on demand. We're not training for a specific event. There is no peaking and tapering. There's a delicate balance.
It's not even long term either. Like Aaron and I just came up here, obviously, from the Dallas area with a very big SWAT team. We literally were out there training them, and that night they immediately had to go out on operation. Right. And so it's that, and that was us training them, but in their normal workouts, they can't get broke off every single day because there's a good chance they may be going out that night, the next day, whatever, right?
I mean, laying in a puddle of sweat, practically puking and whatever. And, at 4:00 and at 4:05, the radio starts chattering and you got to go.
Yeah.
Like that's a risky situation.
So it's the short term, but it's like you said, also the long term. Is it sustainable? Because there is no off season, right? So
there's no deployment where you're going to be gone for 6 months and then at home for 6 months to recover and change things up. It is this constant, like, what should I be doing? And I think more of the question for Aaron is like, what's important? Like, what are the important aspects of all the things that we're talking about? I mean, we're talking about a lot of things, but if you kind of have to boil it down, like, what's important for people to know that on a higher level about, we don't even have to talk about the very specifics of the programming, just about the programming. What should it include? Like, where is your head when you're putting like a performance program together for a team or an individual?
So time efficiency is huge, especially for these guys and what they do. They don't have 2 hours to train. Some of them get lucky if they have an hour at lunch. If they're a full-time SWAT team, maybe they get those 2 hours, hour and a half, but even then they need time to recover, to prepare themselves for what may happen in the evening. So time efficiency is huge. Actually training speed, power, and agility is crucial. And then load management.
Talk about that.
That one's tough for them to do on their own. So how we program here, we do reps in reserve is how we manage that load on and give them a little bit of responsibility because they're grown men and women. They have that responsibility. If they're professionals, they have to learn how to do certain things themselves. Mm-hmm. Like you can't just baby, and they don't want to be babied. They don't want to be. They don't want their hands. Yeah, they want to be pushed. But you give them a sense of ownership by putting in reps in reserve. So there's rate of perceived exertion, so RPE. There's percentage based, and then RIR, reps in reserve. So rate of perceived exertion is just scale of 1 to 10. How hard is it going to be for you? He and I we could set it at 7. We're going to do back squat. It's going to be at 7. I'm not as strong as him, so my weight's going to be a little bit lighter, but it could also be based off of that day and my ability to have my work capacity.
Yeah, on Monday when he came back from the tactical games,
anything I did was a 7.
Everything you did was a 7.
Exactly.
That whole thing is very. It's too subjective.
Yep. Yeah. So you have to be specific.
Right. Exactly.
To the individual.
Exactly.
Yep.
Versus percentage based is very objective. It gives you a set number, 80%, 5x5 back squat. You came back, your training day on Monday, maybe that's what it called for. you're probably not going to be able to hit.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah.
I like percentage-based training. I'll
sure
play
do.
devil's advocate all day on this
I know you
subject.
will. I know you will.
Everybody listen to this. Do not listen to it.
Do not listen to what
We'll
Heppner
just
says.
cut that
Don't
mic
do what
next time.
Heppner said. But
It's very
that's the thing. Like, you feel like you have to be doing that
Yep,
all the time.
exactly.
Right?
For sure.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
challenge.
it gives you a number, and if they're high performers, which most of these guys and girls are, they're going to want to hit that number regardless of how bad they feel.
I
So-
always feel like we were talking about this earlier before they showed up because they were sleeping in, of course.
Yeah, sorry.
And
Drove
I
all
always
night.
feel like percentage-based training and RP are they're like distant cousins. Because even when I'm doing percentage-based training, which is what I always did when I was competing, it was always, like, I didn't know what RPE was, but it was always based upon that. Like, if I go to a bar and I'm feeling under the weather, or even better discussion, I just did a workout with a lot of running and now I got a back squat. Well, I know I'm not going to probably hit 5x5 at 80% back
Right.
squat.
Right.
So I'm going to probably hit 78, 75, and just call it good, because that to me was still RP, even though I didn't know what it was called.
Right.
So
But you understand that about yourself. Like, you have a high level of awareness of number
I didn't
one.
want to get hurt.
Yeah, what
Yeah. As a
exactly
professional,
where
that's-
your
yeah.
limits are.
Yeah, right
You're
there,
right and
professional.
right where, because you're a professional. And I think that's where people get themselves into a lot of trouble. That's very important, that you understand where your right and left limits are and you're working within those, because for Heppner, it's you get hurt or you get overtrained, you're under recovered, and you can't perform the way you need to. And that means you feel like shit. Maybe you don't win, you don't
injured.
podium, whatever, or you get injured. On the flip side of that, obviously, those consequences could be much higher. If you get injured, you can't work, right? If you can't work, you can't be on the team, right? If you can't be on the team, then you can't earn that money, and you can't fulfill the thing that you wanted to do in the first place, which I think is a large driver in this. Is like, there's ego, there's also a sense of pressure to perform, and keep up. But that balance of what am I actually keeping up with and what am I doing is not rooted in a lot of rationale. It's rooted more in like emotion or ego or whatever else. So to your point, like, you just nailed, like, for me, it's the same thing I would be programming for somebody in Gen Pop. Like, who are you? What are you capable of? What are your limitations right and left right now? How do we give you the minimum effective dose to get the maximum result that we can possibly get, while still leaving you all the strength, all the power, all the recoverability, peace of mind, all that stuff, and also the confidence to know that you're doing the right thing. And all of that needs to equal a result, right? And that should be measurable. We should be able to see that. But again, I think the thing that you pulled out right off the top of the list that I think will surprise people the most is time efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and there's not a person listening to this show that is in that field that doesn't struggle with that, right? It's just a period, end of story. It's shift work, right? You never know. Sometimes you may not be going home. Sometimes, there may be some sitting around. How do I handle myself right now and not feel like just because I have the time, I have to go harder? How are you measuring the success in your workout? But that has to start with a solid assessment, of kind of where you are. And so that you have this, like, okay, I'm very informed. Like, I know where my start points are. I know where my parameters are, and I know what my goals are. Now I can start to bridge the gap between where I currently am and what my goals are by putting together an organized program. So there's some specifics I got to know here. Like,
So let's actually back up. So we've kind of talked from the 3,000-foot view of what is an athlete. We've talked about the three components of an athlete, right? We're going to test strength, we're going to test speed and power, we're going to test capacity. And we were always here discussing assessment. And so let's talk about actually how we're going to do it. So I'll kick it off, and then I'll kick it over to you, because I want to hear your rationale for all the data points we have, right? Because I know we've went back and forth. We've definitely argued about what we've chosen.
It's only the capacity part we argue.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so the whole concept is like, when I was competing, we already discussed this. When you're an athlete and you come in, it's really stinking fun to come into a gym and work on what you're good at. If I'm Scott, I'm coming into a gym, just looking at Scott's body type. I want to do some deadlifts and bench press.
Yeah, sure.
If it's me, I want to go run. I want to do GHDs. I want to do burpees, right? But in the long grand scheme of things, it makes me, I know you're thinking.
Who says that? Who says, I want to do burpees? What a freaking weirdo,
Dude,
man.
if I get chased by a bear, I'm definitely escaping. So the concept is, but that doesn't improve you as an overall athlete. Because if I come in every day and work on what I'm good at, I might make small gains, but I can make a better gain on the things that I am terrible at.
Mm-hmm.
So all we're trying to do from the IEP perspective in our approach is, if I get 100 people that come in and say, I think what IEP is doing is great, I want to make sure within reason that all these 100 people are all kind of starting on the same level. But how do I get there? Well, I got to make sure if Joe's terrible at capacity, but really good at strength, really good at speed and power, I need to get his capacity up.
Mm-hmm.
If Susan's over here and she's really strong, but terrible at capacity, maybe the same problem as Joe. Can't remember what I said for Joe. I need to make sure she's on the same level. So if I can get everyone on the same level, which we'll definitely talk about products in future conversations, I want to make sure everyone's on the same level before I shove them into where we got to go.
Which is all of the things, right? To cram into a training program to be good at everything all the time at a moment's notice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
If I'm getting there, I have to do an assessment test. We have to do that. We don't see that. No one's done that yet in my knowledge in this space. I love that I don't know who thought it up. It was one of you guys. It wasn't me. But I love the concept. And so now the concept is, can we assess a person coming in, give them recommendations, let them make an informed decision? They can say no and say, hey, Scott, probably not too good at running.
Nope.
So I'm just kidding. So like, how do we get you there to make sure you'll go with everybody else? And so now just knowing that, like an overview, what are we testing in this assessment? What's the rationale behind it?
So we have strength, speed, power, capacity. 3 tests per section. Keep it even, and then find certain aspects of each. So we narrowed it down to 3 of each. So for the strength, we have the 1 rep max deadlift. So this is a good lower body strength test. Very standardizable. Is that a word?
Yeah, it is today.
It is now.
It is now.
Bam.
Very standardizable. I'm going to keep using that. Pull it from the ground, straight up, lock out the top, bring it back down. Very low risk of injury if you're doing it right.
Yeah,
versus the back squat. So we could have chose the back squat or the front squat or another lower body movement that people may favor, but there's a lot less risk of injury versus when you're pulling just straight up versus you may bail out. You get to a point where you're stuck. You don't have a spotter, whatever goes on at your house. We've decided that safest bet to keep people going and provide an accurate assessment is the 1 rep max deadlift for lower body.
Yep.
Second piece is 3 rep max bench press. Who doesn't like to bench press?
Yeah.
Raise your hand, Scott.
Actually, I don't like to bench press.
I hate it now. But I spent a lot of years doing that shit. Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan, but hey, what SWAT guy has not bench pressed
Yeah,
before?
I mean, it's chest and arms on Monday.
Why 3?
3, again, lower risk of injury. So versus the 1 rep max, go all the way down. You're at very in range of motion. Maybe you relax. Something can go wrong with your shoulder. There's a lot of factors that can go into it versus you pick a little bit lower weight that you can push up, down 3 times, lock out at the top, set the bar up, and then move on with your day.
So it doesn't take a ton of skill to do it.
It doesn't take a lot of skill either. Yeah,
got it.
Which is a lot of why we did these tests too. There's low skill, repeatable effort, a repeatable assessment, low equipment need.
Right.
And they're very accurate.
Yeah, I think just with like the death, people might argue with you about the low skill and low risk of injury on the deadlift side of things. Like there can be an argument made on any of this.
Yeah, anything.
Any of this. So I just want to address it in that one of the things about the deadlift is it is rather self-limiting. Because if your form sucks, so will your lift, right? And you're going to know probably pretty quickly if your mechanics suck.
Your lumbar curve.
You're not moving it, and that's a good indication that you are either lifting too much or you have you don't have the skill at all to do that. You haven't practiced that. Might be a place you need to spend some time. I just want to address that yes, it is a high risk, low reward movement in a lot of cases if you're lifting just for the sake of deadlifting. But if it's for an assessment or if it's for like, again, competition or something that you do, as it applies to something bigger, there's a lot of application there. So
and also, like Aaron said, it's standardizable, as he put it. It's able to be standardized. But the other one, it's validity. It is testing what it's supposed to test, right? Strength, which is what we're trying to look at. Versus, I would say commonly, again, going back to other people in the industry, that some of the things you see, I feel like they normally are missing. So we've got a lower body, upper body push, a lower or upper body pull, which Aaron's about to talk on. But my point to it is that I think that the validity piece is important, right? does it actually measure what it says it measures? We know that those things do, versus if we said the burpee, as Mr. Heppner over here loves, we were trying to assess power. Can he do 50 burpees in X amount of minutes, right? People are like, oh yeah, that's a great, that's not a valid test for power, right? Like, and so I think that is one of the other reasons. Ability to be standardized, but they're also valid measures, which is, to your point, yes. Could there be other that are less technical? Absolutely.
Right.
We're not trying to argue that. I love yours, actually, the way you articulated about deadlift. It's a little bit self-limiting.
Right.
If your form sucks,
so will your lift.
So will your lift,
Yeah.
right?
And even if it doesn't, like even if you're pulling a lot of weight with that form, like you're still going to recognize, like when you get to some of the other lifts, if your skill level sucks, or some of those other assessments, shit's gonna show up. Again, going back to the reason we have 3 per sort of category.
Yeah. And then the last one we have is 1 rep max pull up. So dead hang, all the way, pull your chin over the bar, and then back down.
So I noticed, can you explain to me why we're not testing Olympic lifts, right? We're testing simple lifts. Can we expect to
I feel a fight coming on.
Can we expect to see Olympic lifts in program?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the reason we're not
place,
testing it is because
those are a lot higher skill.
Yeah.
You're going to see a lot of people catch a clean very differently.
Right.
Some people can clean a lot of weight with real bad form, versus some people have really good form and just aren't strong enough yet. So to isolate it, because you can get into the strength, speed, strength, speed, power, strength, raw strength, whatever. You can get a lot of those things mixed in there with that particular lift set of Olympic lifts.
There's a lot of variability.
A lot of variability versus these are dead tests for strength.
Yep.
Deadlift, push, or bench press, and then the pull up.
It's actually pretty hard to mess these up.
Yeah.
Right. And again, like you have to hold, and this is, I think, where we're coming from, like as much as we want to help, there should be a level of accountability to the quote unquote tactical athlete. Like if you haven't done these things, to me, that's a bit of a problem. Like then these are very basic things that anybody's been through any basic level of strength training or power training, or it's spent any time in the gym whatsoever, which shame on you if you're not. I'll say that. I'm not saying the team's saying that. Well, I will put that out there. Shame on you.
Wait till we get
you should be. Everybody knows what these are. And by the way, you were probably been evaluated on these things at some point. You were evaluated on a push-up, so I know you know how to push.
Yeah.
Right. You were evaluated on pull-ups, so I know you know how to pull. It's just what is your strength level at those same movement patterns. Yeah. Again, and we already probably overtalked the deadlift.
Yeah. Hit me with speed and power, Aaron. What we got?
Boy.
What we got in the docket?
So we test 3 in our courses: 15-yard sprint, 5-10-5 shuttle, and then the broad jump. So that covers your straight line speed with the 15-yard sprint, your agility or ability to change direction with the 5-10-5 shuttle, and then your lower body power with the broad jump. These, again, are all standardized, very easy to replicate, very easy to test on your own, or at least with a buddy, or on camera, whatever you need to do. But those are they cover all the bases, super simple tests, very valid, very reliable.
Why 15 yards and not 40?
400.
Oh boy.
Like I said.
Or 400.
Why not the 400 meter sprint?
Yeah, like why 15 yards?
A sprint is the max effort, max velocity you can hold for a set duration. Most people can't hold along, especially if they don't sprint, which this test is meant to expose whether or not they sprint enough or have that speed and ability to produce that power. Most can't hold a good technique or that effort for over 15 yards.
Which is about how long? Like, go back to your assessments and stuff. What are we people
average we've seen is 2 to 2.5 seconds.
Okay, got it. I just was,
and that all depends on how well you can push off the ground.
Yeah, so
I'm probably going to have a slower one because my legs take a little bit longer to get up and go. Versus like my flying 15 would be pretty quick. Just because once I get up and go, I can maintain.
Flying meaning you're already in movement.
I get my movement going and then I hold it for, so once I'm at top speed, you can start the clock and hold it.
So
and there's always things we could modify to have it be perfect, right? We're trying to isolate the best, our clean, sturdy shirt. Because that's always what's going to be, right? You know what I'm saying?
I'd wear the shirt again.
I know you would. There's no doubt.
It's a good looking shirt.
Yeah. But Aaron made a comment. A lot of people have trouble holding that speed much past 15 yards if they have not been training it. Okay, well, now we're talking, it's no longer a speed test at that point. Now it's, can you hold, right? So we're choosing the 15 of, can you sprint fast speed?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to isolate.
Yeah,
right?
because you need to know what that is before you start applying other sprint or run programming effectively, right? So we have to know what this is. And again, it's the cleanest, dirty shirt, as you said. But I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because that's what I was going to note too. Okay, so wait, most people can't sprint well after 2.5 seconds. At least that's what you guys are finding, right? In your evaluations. So, and that's with this population.
Yeah,
right?
and real quick, because I feel like we kind of skipped over this in our evaluations, right? We do some of these testings in our tactical performance lab, which is where this kind of assessment comes from. We test some of these same measures and have a lot of data points on it. Now we're bringing it over for anybody, no matter what population you're coming from.
Yep.
This assessment will give you information, not what you like, not what you, it's going to give you what you are good or bad at, right? To give you guidance on what is the best route for you if you're interested in that. Now, if you're like, screw you, Hep, I don't like your burpees, I'm good at capacity, go do the strength program, rock on, I like it. You know what I mean?
Rock on, brother.
Exactly, rock on, brother.
Have fun.
But we use these measures already, and these are, again, they're validated. Also to clarify, what is validated? Some nerd in the lab tested and said, is this person faster in 15 yards? Aaron is faster than Jake. Oh, yep, in a lab, that is truth. This is a validated measure, right? So that's how it's used in the research side. When we started doing our testing in law enforcement, we used validated measures to try to assess that. That's where some of these are coming from, where each of us kind of are alluding to what we do in classes, just for everyone to understand a little more.
That's a solid explanation, because again, that's the rationale for, we're not just picking numbers out of thin air.
Yeah.
We don't just need one. We're choosing one that makes the most sense for what it is we're trying to do. So you mentioned the 15-yard sprint. What else is up there?
5-10-5 shuttle, or pro agility, if you want to go back to
pro
the
agility,
NFL combine thing.
Pro AG.
Yep, pro AG. So that one's really good, very valid. I mean, obviously, it's used in the NFL combine every single year to test agility. Start in the middle, run 5 yards across, sprint across 10 yards, back through the middle line. Clock stops.
So as a coach, like when you're watching that happen, obviously there's the start and the stop, so you're seeing the time elapsed. Mm-hmm. What are you looking for? What makes a person better in the 5-10-5 drill? And how are we going to use this to make that happen? So there's two questions in that. One is, what are you looking at? And what is a person experiencing besides like an elevated heart rate and maybe some burning lungs?
So we're looking at their ability to decelerate and their ability to reproduce that force. That's the main two pieces. A lot of that shows your athleticism. If how well you can control your body in space, get to a point. How do you turn? Even comes into play with it. There's some technique involved, and which is why like
skills.
There's some skill and technique, just like the power clean,
doing the test or the eval. Sure,
right, exactly. Sure. You can game them if you just want to test for the test, but is that getting you better for your actual job? Most likely not. Actually, it's not. But we want to. It's just a good overall test for agility. There's other tests like the T test, the L drill that we could have incorporated, but we already have so many data points on the pro agility that we added this to it so we can have a good standard to compare to and provide, hey, do you suck at it or are you good at it?
So it's with that test in particular for me, like I kind of look at it is like, how much time can you get back? Like, so the first thing you brought up was like the decel piece. Like how do I manage the changing of direction and the movement itself? So it's like you're stealing time away from the drill. That's what we're kind of measuring. Like, you're measuring that in an elapsed time, but it's like, how fast can you make up the in-between points? That slowing down, stopping, and then changing direction. The person that can do that best runs that best every single time. It's not how fast you can get from the cone to the cone and then back. It's how fast can you change direction to go back to the other cone. And that's where you're making up the time. And when we look at the drills that are happening out there on the, on the range, which, people can see all over Instagram and they'll be able to see after this too. That is really where you're stealing time. Right?
Absolutely.
Like
seconds matter. Milliseconds
matter. Like add those up. Ask any USPSA shooter, right? Or whatever. If you're doing something like that. Anyhow, I just wanted to backfill.
No, obviously, third test is broad jump. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why not vert?
Most people don't have a vertec, which is the gold standard for testing. It's what you see at the combine for NBA, NFL. Most people aren't going to have that. It's a lot of labor to go up on a wall and mark off inches like you would on height and then put chalk on your hand and jump up and try to get that. Even then, there's so much technique involved. Top of that, how you land is a big piece in that too. If you're going max effort jump, you're not going to land ideally. There's not a good chance you're going to land in an athletic position. I've done it before where I've landed with my hips too hyperextended and I've caught my back a little bit. Not significant, but you definitely catch yourself in some odd positions if you're really, really putting out 100% effort. Versus broad jump, put tape on the floor, big jump up and out, good strong landing as best you can, which even if you're not landing, that's a good indicator of like, hey, I need to work on my landing.
Right. And you're a little closer to the ground.
And I also think I also think force output, right?
Yep.
Is more applicable to a forward and out
100%
force output versus just an up and down, right?
Yeah.
They are testing different things. And if we're trying to assess someone's speed power per jumping, sprinting, etc.
Yeah. The ability to accelerate has been proven to show elite athleticism.
Yeah.
If you can accelerate really well, there's a good chance you're going to be an elite athlete or you already are. How much force you can get going from point A to point B.
Yeah, and obviously we already talked about the things that make that happen are the most overlooked things in a program. So this part of the assessment is critical to the bigger whole. Even if you're just okay at strength or maybe you're really good at strength and you have decent capacity, like you need to know this in order to become a better athlete. Like you have to have it all.
So we talked about strength, speed, and power. Obviously the most important one, capacity.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about this. Yeah. Just move on.
Yeah. So what are the 3 tests we're doing for capacity, Aaron?
So we've got a 300-meter shuttle.
Okay.
So we set the course at 25 meters. You run it down and back 6 times. The smoker.
And you guys test this.
We test this every single class on the range and in the gym.
I've been to a couple classes and
it's not fun.
No, it's not fun.
It's not fun.
It's the longest 6 laps of your
A good time is 60 seconds. That's a really good time.
Yeah.
I've seen, obviously elite athletes who train this regularly can get below 60, but the lowest we've had in a class is 60. Average is about 65. Pushing 70 is getting to where you're in that threshold of like, you probably need to work on this. And
so it's a minute. So it's a full minute of
170,
going pretty hard.
My standard.
Right.
Okay, all right.
You're a little nicer.
Hater over here. Jeez, gosh dang.
Right.
You got to figure it out.
Yeah, so it's a full minute of you've got to keep
over.
Yeah.
You have to keep your foot on the gas to try to maintain. You can't go to 90% because you'll probably go.
It's a threshold. You got to find your threshold of what you can hold, and then still have enough in the tank on the last couple of trips to
capacity.
So
but see, here's another one though. It actually is more technical. It comes back to your ability to decelerate and control,
and then come out,
of that right as well. Yeah. Which I think is why I like the 300-meter shuttle a lot more than a 300-meter yard sprint.
Yeah, like on a track.
Just on the track. The open 300.
Yeah, open 300.
Yeah. All right, so that's the first one. Second one.
1,000-meter row. Like it, love it, hate it. It works.
No, we've actually done. I miss these days. We did actually. I'm going to figure out a way to bring it back into the programming. But we actually had a fitness. We have the T-drill, which was a shooting standard that involves speed and power.
Yep.
We actually had a capacity perspective that was very close to that, which, if I recall correctly, was 500-meter row,
20 burpees,
20 burpees
over row.
20 burpees over row, 500-meter row, 20 burpees over row. I had the opposite. For some reason, that was 500, 20.
Yeah, it was not fun.
It was 20, 500, 20.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. You guys are right.
No. It was 500, 2,500.
No, it's not.
Well,
it's not. It's 2,520.
We're going to cut this part out.
Yeah. So anyways, doesn't matter. We've forgotten it because we've done it so many times that we hated it. So
yeah.
I think we're bringing that back, right? We have a 1,000-meter row, a 1K row, which is something that comes from MySpace, which is very testable. We've tested that multiple times across multiple CrossFit Games events.
A lot of data points on it.
Yeah. So it's easy to get data on it.
Easy to find a standard of good, bad.
We kind of figured out that the row erg, whatever you want to call it, concept 2, is something that is readily obtainable in pretty much every department most functional fitness gyms have them.
Yeah.
So,
well, and like in certain states, specifically Texas for sure, they revamped their physical fitness testing to allow for rowers to be used. And so that is, again, it's something that's
an important,
exactly
important thing in terms of the testing, in terms of, what you may or may not be good at in terms of the testing piece, but it doesn't mean you're horrible at that particular.
it is a little bit more skill But the reason I like the rower is because so much emphasis is placed upon running, whether it be sprinting or not, that I kind of like the concept of getting you off your legs. Something different. Like if you got shin splints, which when I was running a bunch, it always would happen sooner or later. Like it's like, you don't need to run more. Like, let's try a different way of measuring capacity, which is great. Which is why I love the 300-meter shuttle, because it's a great way of measuring it. And it's not like you can't really open up as much because it's 25 meters or yards, whatever distance is. But that's why I like the rower, because it's like, I don't have to have you run anymore. If we could figure out a way to get everyone on bikes like Lance Armstrong, I'd do it.
It's also full body, right? It's also full body.
And also your time expectations for this is another piece, right?
So
300 meter.
How long is a 1,500 meter?
So 1,000 meters.
Sorry,
so a 1K row, if you are competing in CrossFit, which I'll give you a couple different variations of it, right? So if we're competing in CrossFit for a 1K row, we measured it in the 2020 CrossFit Games, I believe, or it was during 2020, we had to do either Rogue Invitational or the CrossFit Games at home because we couldn't go in person. And we measured the 1K row. The top athletes in our sport would have been competitive in rowing sports. And they were like 2 minutes and 30, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Stupid fast. I was like, stupid fast. I was like around 3 minutes. Good average time, 3:30. If you're looking at pacing structure, because 500 meter or rowers based upon 500 meter row paces, right? That's a 1:45 pace. That's a good, solid pace to finish. So a 3:30 solid. Anything around the 4 to 5 minute mark is still good.
So you're talking 4 times as much time.
I was going to say, let's hang on just a second. Let's round that out. It's not specifically a me thing, but I just don't want people to be like 3:30. Are you kidding?
Look, Jake's mad because he wrote it in 4 minutes, and he had to make sure I said he had a good time.
So that one, I think that's the important thing to think about here is like with the 300 meter shuttle, you're talking about a minute. With a 1,000 meter row, you're talking about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Why? Why is that important?
We're dipping into different levels of capacity. You have your short anaerobic, which is about minute. Well, want to get in the weeds.
It depends.
It depends on who you're talking
not
to.
Get in the weeds
we can get in
the
weeds. So we have a shorter anaerobic with the 300 meter shuttle with about a minute and a half. Then you have your longer anaerobic. So you're hitting your 4 to 5 minute threshold or time domain with the 1,000 meter row. And then the last test, the last test is a 1.5 mile run. One, again, it's in the Cooper standard. So there's a ton of data on it. So we're able to tell you whether or not it's good or bad.
Let's talk a little bit on Cooper just so
I'll let you do that. That's the nerd side.
All right. So the Cooper Institute is one of the leading research facilities in human performance out of Dallas, Texas, I believe. And so the Cooper Institute has put out a lot of research and testing, specifically in law enforcement, the Cooper standards, law enforcement and military. They have a battery of tests that they put in there. They had them validated. They brought in a bunch of people, said, hey, what's the VO2 max on this person? They went and ran 1.5 miles. Hey, it correlates that is in fact truth. So that it is validated for a aerobic testing.
So better 1.5 mile time typically associates with a better VO2 max.
Yeah, indicates,
And most of the time you're going to get, and I'd say a 9 minute is a really good pace. 16, I think, is what is minimum standard to make for the Cooper standard. So you're getting into that aerobic time domain.
So now we've tripled. We've basically tripled the time that it takes for the 1,000.
We'll call it 12 minutes. So you got 1 minute, 4 minutes, 12 minutes.
So again, you're moving into, we'll talk about this again on another episode. We're not going to do that today, but different energy systems as it relates to capacity.
Exactly. Yep.
How to train those, where the misconceptions are, and again, I think the how part is what people want to hear, but giving them some basis for understanding like what our rationale here was or what your rationale here was is super important. So these are not randomly, we're not just trying to beat people up, right? Because this all then correlates to, again, being that more informed consumer so that we can help you maybe make a more informed decision. I mean, what else do you want to say about that assessment there on the capacity side that you want people to take away? Because for me, I think people just look at this as the shitty part of anything that they have to do in their workouts, right?
Right.
And the other part is they're like, fuck, dude, if doing this workout means I have to run 1.5 miles or 2 miles, or I have to put in 20 miles a week to put in, on the road on my feet in order to build my capacity, I'm not interested. The good news is you will not have to do that. I mean, there's.
We can talk about running later on.
I know, like
we got to know something about
Aaron
that.
is ready to
I'm
roll
excited for
on
that one.
one.
That's going to be good.
Hey, I think he's titling it "Throw Out Your Running Shoes"
Yeah,
or something like that.
Pulling things away.
I think it's a good thing. Yeah, I think it's a good title. But
No, it's a good test to have, but we'll definitely have a more in-depth conversation on it later.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good tool because when we first brought it up, I didn't like the test until Jake was like, "It's tested. People used it. Like it's important." I was like, "Okay, fine, Jake."
And even another piece of it is most people know, like they know their back squat.
Yep.
Most people who are in this realm know their 1.5 mile time.
Yeah.
They test it once a year at bare minimum.
Right.
So they can just go back, hey, this is my last 1.5 mile time.
Just
I'm just
roll
going to
with
plug
that.
it in.
roll with
Just
that.
roll it. If you know it, you don't actually have to take the test unless you just want to do it.
Yeah.
You can just plug it in your most recent. If you did it 2 weeks ago, perfect.
Yeah.
So you did it 6 months ago and you keep maintaining the amount of running you've been doing, just plug it in.
Yeah, being off by a little bit is not going to be a
10
huge
seconds,
deal here.
Yeah.
You know what your average is, and that's what
Exactly,
we're
yeah.
looking for here. Again, another very accessible test.
Yep.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
So now we've discussed the test, right? We know the rationale behind, which I appreciate that, right? Like it's. I know when we came up with it, we had gone through a couple iterations of them.
There's a lot of discussion.
Shot down a few of them. Yeah, I think I was in Mexico on my baby moon. We were
Baby
talking
moon,
about it. Yeah, my
Right.
wife was mad. But we had a lot of discussions about what we wanted to choose. And I'm glad we came to a consensus. But also what I'm even more glad about is that we have reasons behind it. It's not just like, well, why'd you choose the 1.5 miles? Well, it's just a couple times around a track. That's what it makes it cool. Like it has a reason behind it.
Yeah.
So now that
Jake is huge on know the why.
Yeah.
Ever since I started programming, if I can't put it in the program and tell you exactly why I put it in there, I'm not going to put it in there.
Yeah, it's not based around some concocting some scenario. This isn't scenario-based testing,
Right.
Which I think gets
Great.
I think that
Call it,
stuff
yep.
winds up in this space well too often. Like it's like, hey, we're doing this because it matches up
Yep.
with something that you might do in the street or something like that.
Yes.
And that's where the over-sciencing my stuff comes in. It's like that's just
Over specificity.
that's dumb.
It's
it
not
doesn't
even over specificity. We're just it's the scenario based
stop it.
Thank you.
crap.
Stop imagining
Exactly.
things.
Stop imagining things. Listen, look at your job. Can we isolate a variable? All right. How do we test that variable? Is that test actually test what we're saying? Okay. Check the box. There's one. Right. We've done that. I mean, yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine playing the nerd card here because I think it is way over amplified in the community. And I see these tests. When I first started working with teams, I saw this so often. They're like, I want this test and we're going to do barrel rolls and somersaults and then go tackle each other and climb up the wall. Like, great, maybe capacity or job functional test, but you're not isolating a variable and you cannot say, well, I'm going to get better by doing X.
Right.
Right. And so great call. I think it's way overplayed. And I think we're trying to be efficient, but give you informed information so you can better make a decision.
Yeah, there's in all these assessments, there are no weight vests, there are no blue guns, there is no kit of any kind, there is no hanging on to stuff, dragging things around, anything like that. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in any of evaluations that may happen to do that, but there aren't in fitness programming. There aren't in human performance programming. There may be in testing a drill for a scenario or for, to drill something very specific where you would have that, but that is now you're concocting.
Dude, I'll say it.
Now you're concocting
unless you can articulate to me why, which I have yet to meet somebody that's like, well, per the researcher, give me a very specific, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Like you can't standardize it. And if you can't say this is exactly why, because this test is validated with a plate carrier, therefore I used it per the job.
Yeah.
I've yet to see it happen.
We're doing this exercise so that I can jump up and and get through a window that's 3 feet off the ground.
Go practice that skill some other time. Don't test it.
Or look at power output. Like
what do you have to be able to do?
Say lower extremity power. Lower extremity power.
Right.
Like that's the answer, right? And so, yeah, I think we're on the right path here. It'll be a good test and hopefully be informative.
Yep. So essentially how it's going to close it all out, how it's going to really work together is we've got 9 different litmus tests we're going to do, right? We do 3 in each of these genres, right? And then once you input the information, we will immediately recommend, hey, Scott, looks like this is probably going to be the best program for you. Now, you can do whatever you want.
Yep,
sure. I think it's going to be the first time that someone's done this before where it's like, hey, like I mentioned in the first previous example, if you have 100 people come on and I want them to all be on a similar kind of concept, then I have to make sure that I raise the capability of someone by focusing on something they are not good at.
Yeah, and how does that all work? We talked about this before, just in terms of like trying to get all the things done. So if you have a good level of all of this, like we'll have a program that you can get into that will help you maintain this and even build, right? So build and maintain. But if you're falling short, like you have a shortcoming, if you will, or a deficiency, we'll have programs to backfill all the things we've talked about, right? The strength, the speed and power, and the capacity. So that, again, like you were using me as an example before, how do we bring people up to the level so that when they get into like this more ongoing program, that it makes sense for them?
Yeah, more well-rounded, robust program.
It makes sense for them. Like we want to walk you into that in the best position possible so that makes the most sense for you. Or again, informed consumer, informed decision. Again, if you decide to go a different direction, then you know what? I'm not stopping you. Like go right ahead. And it doesn't mean you could never come out to get back into one of those programs for the person that's like, hey, I found a little space, little time in my schedule. I really want to focus on strength now and put some emphasis into that. And you want to walk it back into our strength program and really go ham there. Shit, go do that. And then come back. So there's always, and all of the programming, by the way, will have some sense of all of the things involved. It's just focused on one thing. So
that's a good call.
If you're building strength, you will also be building a certain level of capacity and power.
It's just going to be the focus will be a little different. Which is our next conversation we're definitely having.
Exactly.
Yeah.